Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of I Never Knew or Inc. by Life Coach Maureen. I'm so happy to have all of our listeners here today. I welcome you. You are going to be so thrilled with our guest today. He's so interesting. His story is going to be so impactful, and I can't wait to tell you about him. His name is John Giordano, and he's gone through incredible life transformation. From the stigma of childhood sexual abuse, growing up in a mafia family, homelessness, and severe addiction, to being a renowned addiction expert with 36 years of sobriety. Oh, big applause for that. He started his own holistic treatment center with only $300, which he eventually sold for $45 million. Currently, he's a published author of 3 books, consultant for South Beach Detox, and the chaplain for the North Miami Police Department. He specializes in holistic mental health and trauma recovery. He's appeared on many national and local television and radio shows as a respected addiction expert and has contributed to over 73 scientific peer-reviewed research papers. So without further ado, my goodness, that resume just keeps going. Welcome, John, to I Never Knew podcast.
Thank you.
I am
Also, part of that, I'm also a Grand Master in the martial arts, Black Belt Hall of Fame, National Karate Champion, and Judo. I got a lot of things.
Oh my gosh. We got Barker in the back. See, I love dogs. It's National Dog Day. It's only fitting that I should have a dog in the background. So that's awesome. What we want to start with is to have you tell your story of what you want to. I'm so sorry. Hold on one moment. All right, John. So you take it away, whatever you want to do. This is your show. Tell us your story. Tell us anything that you think our listeners would love to hear.
All right. How much time do we have so I know how to gauge this?
We have 1 hour.
Oh, okay, good. All right. I always start off a lot of my podcasts with what I wrote. I don't really need my glasses, but it's easier to read. Okay, it's called, this book is called The Kid from the South Bronx Who Never Gave Up.
Nice.
Okay, here is my roadmap for positive change. There is one thing in this world, one special lesson, one constant that has guided me through the turbulent waters of life. This infinite rule, which most people know but ignore, or who simply do not follow their life lessons. That is, no matter what, no matter the circumstances, the obstacles, the people that get in our way, or things that slow us down, follow this one simple rule. Never give up on your dreams, never let go of your passions, and especially never give up on yourself or a God of your understanding. My name is John Giordano, and I'm a recovering addict who has turned $300 into $45 million after I got into recovery. I was blessed to become extremely successful, and I'd like to share my story with you. This is how my life was transformed and how I was saved from falling into the abyss of hell, and by following this one rule and learning how to have a life worth living.
Wow, I love that. The foundations, you just gave foundations of living. How amazing that is.
Well,
go ahead. So tell us your story from the beginning, since this is I Never Knew. This is like, where did we begin? Where was the lowest point? And what are those profound moments that transformed you to where you are today?
Well, everybody has a story. Okay, this is just one of the stories that I was blessed to be able to rise above all the things that had happened to me. So it begins when I was growing up in the South Bronx, in Harlem, in the South Bronx. My neighborhood was one of the worst neighborhoods in the United States. Matter of fact, Time magazine wrote an article It was called Fort Apache, was the police department. It was the worst place in the whole country. There was gangs and all kinds of things. My father, we're Italian descent. I was brought up in the projects. We're a lower income family. My father sold produce, among other things. And anyway, when I was 8 years old, my father got arrested for selling drugs, and he wound up going to jail for 4 years. So I kind of grew up without a father for those formative years. At 8 and a half, I was molested by some boys in the neighborhood. Now, what had happened is that, I do therapy with people that have been molested. And it's very interesting dynamic that goes on. While I was being molested, part of me liked it. And I felt all the shame and his guilt because I wasn't supposed to like that. And I thought I had some evil inside of me. So I went to a priest. And this guy went to a Catholic school. So I went to a priest and said to him, if you could take this evil out of me. So he told me to do 5 Hail Marys, 10 Our Fathers, and you'll be fine. So we all know how that works. Anyway, when I was 9, I was molested by my babysitter. She was 14. And so that happened then. Then I winded up getting into gangs later on. And when I was about 9 and a half, 10, I was in a Hispanic gang. I was in a black gang. I was in an Irish gang, an Italian gang. I was in every gang known to man. So I was in those gangs for quite a while. And when I was 12, my mother brought me to the doctor, and I was anemic. And she said, that's impossible. I'm an Italian mother, I feed them, And what she didn't know was that the kids used to call me Fat John when I was a kid. So what happened was I stopped really eating. And I kind of had almost like an eating disorder, you would call it.
Yeah.
So anyway, then I straightened that out. And when I was about 14 and a half, we were riding down the street or walking down the street. We saw a karate school. And my friend and I were both in a gang together. And I said, you know what? I wonder how tough the karate guy is that's teaching here. Let me go up and I'm going to see if I can beat him up. Which I don't suggest, by the way. Wasn't a good idea. Anyway, we went upstairs and they were teaching the classes, and we were waiting around, and it was getting late, and I had to get home. And my father, by that time, was back out of jail, and I had to make sure I got home on time because he would stand behind the door with a belt and hit me on my butt. So I went home and I told him I wanted to join the class. I really didn't want to join the class to learn anything. I wanted to join the class to see if I could beat up the teacher. That's how stupid I was. You're 14 and a half, you think you got everything, and smart. So anyway, my father said yeah, my mother said no, and eventually my mother gave in, and they had to sign a paper. She had to be, at the time, this was 1962. You had to be 15 years old. So I went to the school, and it was a jujitsu class, but I didn't even know the difference. And they had this small little guy with a round face and a little stomach on him. And he was teaching, we did rollouts and we did falls. And then he put us in a group, and he said, I'm going to teach you how to block a punch. I need a volunteer. So, of course, I raised my hand right away. And as he was talking, I tried to sneak punch him. But that's another thing. Don't do that. It's not good. Anyway.
all the do not do's.
No, I winded up on the floor. I had a foot in my throat, and I had a big round face looking down and smiling at me. Now, I didn't know how I got from point A to point B, by the way. Okay, all I know is I was on the floor. I fell in love with the martial arts. And therefore, what I did is I got out of the gangs, and I went and started studying the martial arts. And I took all that anger that I had and all that confusion in I had, and I put it into training. And I became a judo champion. And then I became I did the karate. Then I became a karate champion. All that stuff. By the time I was about 17 and a half, I got my black belt. And how that happened was my teacher, who was a famous, my teachers were very famous. There were Grandmaster Frank Ruiz, who's known all over the world. Grandmaster Peter Urban, another Grandmaster who knows all over the world. Mr. Visitation, another one, and Grandmaster Hara. So these people were famous in the martial arts, and I was fortunate enough to learn from them. So what happened was my teacher didn't want me to leave because I was one of the top students in the school. And he says, look, if you want your black belt, I was already a black belt in judo and a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I just wanted my other black belt in karate because I was going to Florida. So what happened was, he said, you have to take first place in these two tournaments. And one was on Saturday and one was on Sunday. Now, these were the biggest tournaments in the country. One was at Madison Square Garden and the other one was in New Jersey. So I said, look, sensei, that means teacher. I said, can I just take second place on at least one of them? He said, okay. So he felt that I wasn't going to be able to do that in these tournaments. Well, anyway, I had to fight about 10 times, and I took first place in the first tournament. Then the second tournament, all right, I was fighting for first and second place with my dojo brother, okay? And he threw a side, it was 2-2, and he threw a side kick at under my arm, and I wore a judo gi, so the judo gi was kind of big. So it really wasn't close enough to be called a point. Either you have to hit the guy, or you have to be at least a couple inches away. Anyway, they gave him the point, and he said, no, it's not a point. I said, no, I don't care. I said, I don't care about taking second place. I got my black belt, so I'm interested in it. So that's what happened. I got my black belt, went to Florida, and of course I was chasing after a girl, and I didn't know anybody there. All I knew was one guy, and and it was all kinds of, the women were 10-1, and here I am, 17 and a half, and I thought I died and went to heaven. So anyway, I was there and I started teaching karate. I had a little school, and the students used to come in stoned. And I would look at them and go, oh, okay. And I didn't do any drugs. I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs, I didn't do anything. And I said, okay. And then I worked them out till they threw up. And I figured that would discourage them. Well, it didn't. So what wound up happening was they came in the next day, did the same thing. And they said, well, you don't know what it's like to do this. And I said, well, I don't want to know, right? But what had happened was I had a neighbor that came into my apartment at the time, and he had this little bottle with clear liquid in it. And I said, what's that? He said, oh, that's LSD. So I says, oh. And I had heard about it, that it expands your mind, and I was always interested in learning and expanding my mind. So I said, let me see it. So he showed me, I uncapped it, and I drank the whole thing. Well, he was horrified, because what I drank was enough for 5 people. Yeah. And I was on a journey for about 4 days, day and night. Okay. And it was pretty wild. And thank God he knew what he was doing, because part of that journey was, I don't know, for some reason, he looked like a frog to me. And I don't have anything against frogs, but that's where I said, you know what? I think I'm going to kill you. And he said, oh, look at that light. And then my mind changed and we went on a journey. So I really liked what that was doing to my mind. So I started doing a lot of different psychedelics. I was doing peyote, I did mescaline, I had the LSD, and then I started smoking pot. And I didn't like pot too much because it made me always hungry, and it was just getting in my way. But then I met a girl, and eventually she was Jewish, I was Italian, so her parents wanted her to marry a Jewish guy. And so they eventually, she told him she was going out with me. And anyway, they met my parents. Now, they didn't know, my father was a heroin dealer. My uncle was a hitman. My other relatives were whatever. They were doing all kinds of crimes. And they loved my family. Well, my family's a great family, except they do things that are a little off track. So anyway, my uncle threw our wedding. And what had happened was the caterer, it was really funny, the wedding, by the way. On one side now, her father was a lawyer and her mother was the head of the PTA. Now, my family, my father was a heroin dealer and my mother was a homekeeper, and the rest of the people on the other side of the aisle, they were carrying guns. And on the other side of the aisle, they were carrying pens. So it was the dynamic was a little different.
Right.
Okay. So what had happened was the caterer insulted my uncle in the wedding in front of the people. So the next morning he killed him. And what we don't know for sure, but he killed him. Anyway, what had happened was the police were coming to my grandmother's house, and my whole new family was there. And she got a call and says, "You got to get out of here now. The police are coming." She's taking guns and throwing it down to shoot. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff. So anyway, it was 4 hours before we had to leave for the airport. So thank God for my mother. She said, "Oh, John gets anxiety. Let's go to the airport now." So we went to the airport. And meanwhile, what happened was eventually they arrested my uncle. And he was acting crazy, so they put him in a straitjacket. They were taking him down a flight of stairs, and he dove down head first. And so they wound up putting him in a mental institution for a couple of years. And then they went to court, and they couldn't prove that he did anything, so he got off. Meanwhile, I started doing all kinds of drugs. I was teaching. I was doing two sides of the fence. It wasn't so bad the way I was doing it, because when you use drugs and alcohol, it hardly ever really starts off where it's a total nightmare. It's fun, it's exciting, and this was the '60s, so everybody was doing that, so it was just a common thing. Anyway, even though I was using, okay, on the weekend, and I was working out during the week, I did a lot of things. I did 8 plays in the Theater of Performing Arts, kabuki theater plays. I designed plays. Where else? I did karate demonstrations. I wove them into a story format of a Shaolin monk, young boy trying to be a Shaolin monk. And we had storytelling, we had all that kind of stuff going on. And we had standing room only in Jackie Gleason Theater of Performing Arts in Miami Beach for 8 years in a row. So even though I was using drugs, I still was doing things that were really cool. There's a lot of, I could go into a lot of things, but I want you to read the book. So I'll fast forward it. What happened at one of the shows, one of my black belts also was an archer. And I saw in a magazine that this Oriental fellow was catching arrows, live arrows, okay? So I said, "Oh, if he can do it, I can do that." All right? So, but I didn't realize it was a 10-pound bow, which is a very slow moving arrow. Okay. I used a 40-pound hunting bow, okay? Which you don't even see the arrow.
Yeah.
So I put some foam on the arrowhead, and we were practicing, and I was able to catch 4 arrows out of 10. But it wasn't good enough for the show. So I said, "Look, let's do it this way. You aim at my chest, okay? And I'll just move out of the way." And I had to have a plywood on side stage, so the arrow had to go someplace. All right, but the arrow I used was a hunting arrow, and it was like this, where it had blades on both ends. So just before he was about 20 minutes before we were supposed to go on and do that part of the show, he had an epileptic seizure. He was an epileptic. Anyway, I had to dive on him. He was in a side stage, and we dove and we fell into a closet with all the screws, a maintenance closet. And so I'm rubbing his temporal lobes. I'm trying to not make him swallow his tongue. And eventually I got him out of it. And then he had to go on stage and shoot an arrow at me. And if he miscalculated, he'd kill me. So I said, "Okay, can you do this, Bobby?" He said, No, I can do it. I can do it. I said, "Oh, okay." And I was really very scared, but I did it anyway. Scared and stupid. I'll put it that way to you.
Trusting, very trusting.
So it would come time for him to shoot the arrow at me as the guy's telling the story, and this guy's attacking me with a bow, and he shoots the arrow, and the arrow looked like it was just going like this. And I got out of the way, and it sliced my uniform, went into the plywood, and almost killed the curtain guy.
Oh my God.
So after that, when the curtain closed, they started yelling at my black belt, saying, listen, why did you shoot it so slow? He says, I didn't shoot it so. You couldn't even see the arrow flying. I was so scared that my mind actually slowed that arrow down. It was really the wildest thing that ever happened to me.
Wow.
So that was that story. Now, as time went on, I started doing, I said it would never be like my family. I wound up doing collection work for the smugglers. Matter of fact, I used to go to Colombia in Cartagena, and I used to teach one of the cartel's bodyguards. Okay. Then I was dealing drugs. So I was doing a lot of crazy stuff. We're doing collection work, and I had a whole group of people, and it was kind of like Wild Wild West. So I became exactly like my family, and never got arrested, never got even a misdemeanor. And God was watching over me. And so what wind up happening, long story short, I also threw a concert with James Brown. And what had happened was I was working for Flea Market USA. It was a flea market. One of my students was one of the owners, and he asked me if I wanted to buy a booth. I said, no, I want to run your flea market. So he said, look, I know you karate, I respect you. He says, but I said, look, he said, well, how much money do you want? I said, look, I want 1,000 a week. Now this is 1980. All right. So he says, 1,000 a week. So I says, all right, tell you what, give me $250. You set me goals that you want me to attain. And then if I attain them, I want 1,000 a week. So we said, okay. So that's what 3 months later, I got my 1,000 a week. So what I did was they wanted a grand opening like no other. So I said, it was 500 businesses under one roof. They had a huge, huge parking lot. All right. But it was in Liberty City and Overtown. That is in the Black community. And they just had the riots there. So people didn't want to go into the neighborhood. They were afraid. So when I said, look, we need a theme. So what I did was I went to all the deacons and all the pastors, and all the priests. And this is before I became a chaplain, by the way. I was still using. And I'm dancing with them in the church. And I said, you know what? I want to invite President Reagan to the flea market grand opening. So, of course, everybody laughed at me. Right? I said, look, you never could tell. Look, the theme is we're revitalizing Liberty City and Overtown after the riots. They said, John, the president's not even going to answer you. Well, 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the White House. That's in the book, so in case people don't believe me. And it said, sorry, the president couldn't attend and do the scheduling, but we're sending a representative. And they sent Carrie Meeks, who was the state representative who later became Senator Meeks. And, they really checked you out. So they checked me out everywhere, who I was, what I was doing. And she went to the Martin Luther King Foundation, and they presented me with the Martin Luther King Award on stage in front of 60,000 people.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
I know people don't believe these stories, but I have pictures of James Brown with all those people because I know how people are. So even though I was using, I was still able to function.
Yeah.
And that's what they call functioning addicts or alcoholics. There's a lot more stories, a lot more things that I did, but that's just a brief thing. Just one more that you'll get a kick out of. It was Christmas time and they wanted something different. And I said, okay, look, I want to go up in a hot air balloon and I'll dress as Rudolph or Santa Claus and the balloonist can dress whatever he wants. So the balloonist was Santa Claus and I was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And I said, I want to throw flyers out over the city. He said, John, you can't do that. We'll get tickets for littering. I said, no, you don't understand. I want to throw your money out over the city. He said, what? So I said, yeah. So what I did was I made up a sticker and I put it on the dollar bills and I turned them into flyers. And we went up in the hot air balloon and we were throwing money out over the city. And we were on every radio station, every television station. And in the book, you see, it was on the front page of the Miami News.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy stuff. Then the fourth time that we went up, all right, the balloon caught a crosswind and we were going out to sea. And I said, I'm not going out to sea. I said, crash into the building, I'll dive through one of the windows. So the guy was crazy. So the guy said, no, we're not doing that. So we were in the bay meanwhile, and we'll go towards the ocean. So we said, look, I'll go along the bay, we'll hit the seawall, and hopefully it'll drag us, okay, where I can shut off the plane. So I said, okay, whatever you want to do. We hit the seawall, and so happened there was a fire station there. And we had the firemen, they were laughing so hard, they were trying to put their clothes on, trying to get us. Right? I'm blinking, I have a little button where I was blinking my nose, it was turning red, right? And that's when it went out to help us with the balloon.
The fire department had to save Rudolph and Santa. I can
We
just
crashed in a fire station.
Oh my
So,
gosh, I could just picture this, and I love how you were so like, okay, do whatever you need to do, just run into the building. I mean, anybody else is like, I'm gonna die. And you're like, okay, whatever. I love
that's how
that.
crazy I was, you know. So anyway, eventually what happened was I started getting out of control because now the drugs started really taking hold. And it started to really mess me up with a lot of different things. So my family did an intervention on me. An intervention is when your family members get together with a therapist and, want you to go into treatment. Now, I told you who my family is.
Yeah.
So I was wondering who's doing an intervention on them.
All
So the
right.
family,
Who's the
there were
intervention
drug
for?
dealers, hitmen, and I mean, I'm saying, well, wait, what do you mean you're doing it? So anyway, my mother said to me, she'll never talk to me again if I don't go in. And my Italian mother, she wasn't like that. I said, let me just do it, get everybody off my back. I don't have a problem. They're crazy. They have a problem. So I had some coke in my sock. I went into the bathroom, did a couple of minutes before I went up, and I went up to treatment. So here I am. I'm wearing dark sunglasses because I don't want anybody to know who I am. That's how stupid I was. All right, because I taught a lot of the doctors and nurses. I taught the kids karate.
Oh,
Right,
wow.
but
Yeah.
that didn't work out too well. They knew because they knew my name, and the guy came up from the business office to talk to me, and he was one of my students. So I was embarrassed. I felt, really embarrassed and angry. And then I was in group, and then they told me to share my story in group, my deepest secrets. I said, if I do that, I have to kill you. So, I was the nastiest client you want to have, but my family knew the owners of the treatment center, so they tolerated a lot of my stupidity. And anyway, what had happened was I started to clear up. They detoxed me, and my drug of choice really was cocaine.
Mm.
But it took over my whole brain, and I started to clear up, and I started to realize how I was hurting myself and my family. So as time went on, I started to clear up. I started to realize all these things. And then it was around Christmas time. I got clean December 4th is when I went to the hospital. And now it's Christmas Eve coming, and I wanted to go home. Well, I didn't want to go home because it was Christmas Eve, and I didn't want my kids to see me in the treatment center because my friends would come over with Christmas cards with Coke in them. Well, that was the only reason I wanted to do that. All right. But I told them, I want to go home. It's Christmas. How can you let my kids see me in here? Which was baloney. So what had happened was they told me I couldn't go. And I don't know about anybody, I don't know about you or anybody else, but I didn't get just angry. I got rageful. And it didn't just go away in 10 minutes or an hour. Sometimes it lasted for a couple of days even. So I went over and I punched the door in my room. I went in, I never unpacked my bags. I always had them in the closet. I used to just pull shirts out and pants when I needed it, because I was always leaving. I was always going to the elevator with my suitcases, and they always would bring me back. Oh, John, talk to the therapist. I would stay, So anyway, what had happened was, I remember my therapist, he said to me, John, he says, do you ever pray on your knees? So I looked at him, I says, let me explain something to you. I went to Catholic school. I got calluses on my knees. I said, are you serious? He said, no, for humility. I said, why? God doesn't listen to me? How about if I'm in the closet? Does he hear me? He said, no. And it just stuck in my head for a reason. I was in a lot of pain, emotional pain. So I said, all right, let me get my knee down. And I couldn't put my knee down. Now, I know that sounds a little strange, but I couldn't get it down. So I finally pushed my knee down. I had to push my other knee down. And for the first time, I said, whatever's out there, God, energy, just please take this away from me. And it went away like it never was there. And as crazy as I was, I tried to get it back. I tried to think about all the anger, wouldn't come back. And that was my first spiritual awakening in treatment. Then I had another one. About a week later, they kept me for 6 weeks instead of 4. Then I had another one. See, at the third week, at the end of the third week, they do what is known as exiting. So you sit in a room, very intimidating, by the way, with the doctors, with the nurses, with the therapists, and they give a report on how you're doing and whether you should stay longer in treatment or go to long-term treatment. So I'm in there, and the doctor goes, John's been doing really well, and everybody's saying how good I'm doing. I'm sharing in group and doing all kinds of things. So the head doctor excuse me, the head doctor turns around, looks at me, and goes, he's full of shit, just like that. I looked at her and I called her all kinds of names. And then I turned around to everybody and said, you know what? I could kill all of you in this room. You'll never be able to get out alive. Okay. And the doctor looked at me, and the other doctor says, you know, John, all we want to do is help you. And all I can tell you is tears poured out of my face. All right. I ran out of the room like I was this big. I was in my shoes running out of the room. And that's when I had that awakening.
Wow. Yeah. So much humility, and so much for you to feel like, I feel like you had a persona of this tough guy, and letting anything or anyone in for vulnerability for you was the biggest struggle, I would think.
Absolutely. Well, you know, there was this little sick little kid that was damaged.
Yeah. Never healed.
It was the kid that was running the show, not the adult. And that's what you find out in a lot of addicts. An
Yes.
inner child that you don't deal with, all the trauma that I had. You know, kids used to tease me and pick on me when I was a kid. And I was so afraid and things like that. So, you know, what had happened is that when I got out of treatment, is the thing, my wife picked me up with the kids, and she had a vial of Coke, and she says, here, just do one hit. You know, you haven't done it in a while. I said, excuse me, I've been in treatment for 6 weeks, and now you want me to do cocaine? So I said, that ain't happening. But they told me not to make any changes for the first year. So we went to therapy, her and I. She was still using, I wasn't. You know, we had 2 little kids. It was kind of rough. She wasn't like me. She wasn't a dysfunctional addict. You know, she was a, whatever you want to call her, addict. Okay, a functional addict.
Mm-hmm.
So that went on. You know, it was like we got married, her and I. She was a Playboy bunny. Hugh Hefner's jet, all that stuff. I lived in my karate school when we met. I had nothing. And she would pull up in a limousine, come upstairs, and you know, give me some Coke. We would do Coke together. It was like crazy. We wound up eventually getting married. Okay, it was like 2 empty shelves getting married.
Nice.
You know?
Yeah.
So that there's a lot to that story too, and that's in the book also. So what had happened was, after about 9 months, almost a year, I said, look, I can't do this anymore. I told my therapist, I got to get out of this relationship. So I got divorced. Now, when I got divorced, what had happened was she got the house, she got the car, okay, and I had my clothes. So what the windup was, is I moved into I had a karate school at the time. I moved into my karate school. I lived in my dressing room, literally. Now, the dressing room was, I don't know if you know, like, there's like 2 buildings. They usually have a space in between the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what happened was somebody put a roof on it in the back and the front, and they had also made an entrance into the storefront, which was my karate school. So it was like 8 feet wide and 15 feet long, and that's where I lived.
Wow. And
what I did was, since I had no money, all right, because now I couldn't do collection work, I couldn't deal drugs because I'm in recovery.
Yeah.
So And you want to know, I'll tell you something wild. Maureen, I was happy. I used to get out of bed. I used to take a shower, work out, and that was peaceful. I go to my meetings, I read my literature. And for the first time, I was at peace. So what happened was, since I didn't have too much money, I went to all the stores in the neighborhood. And I went to a clothing store. And I said to them, look, I got the karate school down the street. How about I teach you karate and you give me a shirt and a pair of pants? I had more clothes than the clothing store. Then I went to another place that sold vitamins. I did the same thing. And another place, a restaurant. That's how I got some of my food. So
resourceful. And I know a lot of people when they tell their stories and will say, what is the one thing you learned about yourself? How resourceful we can be when we need to be. And I love that you said you were at peace for the first time. What I heard was you were living a simple life finally for you.
well, and that's the story. Matter of fact, I wasn't. No, I'm sorry. I said the wrong part of the thing. When I first got out of treatment, when I lost the house and I lost everything, my friend lent me a room. Okay, I lived in the karate school after that. When my friend lent me a room in a hotel that he owned, and I had a bicycle that somebody loaned me, I had a jar I used to put my quarters in when I had quarters. And my kids used to come and we all used to cry together.
Oh my goodness.
So, that was that story. The one with the school was earlier. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Anyway, because I got divorced again, because I married 4 times.
Okay.
My father says, keep doing it till you get it right. So I did it this time. I'm with my wife for 26 years, 27 years. She's unbelievable.
Nice.
Anyway, so I got tired of living there and crying with the kids. And, I said to my friend, I said, I really want to open up a treatment center. I have this famous doctor that wants to do it. And he says to me, John, he says, you got this doctor that wants? I said, yeah. He said, well, you got the doctor. I'll give you the money. So he says, how much do you need? Now, what do I know how much I need? I was in a treatment center. I don't know what it cost to run a treatment center. I said, oh, $250,000. He's okay. If you got that doctor, I'll give you the money.
Oh, doesn't hurt to ask.
I went to the doctor. He said, yeah. I said, hey, I'd like to open up a treatment center. I got $250,000. Would you be interested? And he said, yeah. All right. He was like a comedian. He said, I was just thinking about that, John. So anyway, I did that. And long story short, I didn't know it was unethical. I took a lot of the people that were working in Mount Sinai Hospital, where I went to treatment, and I hired them for my treatment center. And I gave them double their salaries. Okay. And we had a very successful treatment center. But my therapist, who I hired, who was making $29,000 a year, I gave him $50,000 a year. And he didn't like that his client was his boss. Now, I wasn't his boss. I'm so happy he saved my life. I was trying to help him.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, long story short, we couldn't make payroll and we were packed. So my friend that gave the money said, they're stealing. I said, no, I'm a street guy. I don't trust anybody. But I got to recovery. I got so sober to get stupid. So I said, no, they're in recovery. They wouldn't do that. So they started blaming him, and he never even got to touch the checkbook. So I went into the doctor's office and said, you stealing? He said, put his head down. He says, yeah. He was taking the checks that were made out to his name, and he was buying hookers, buying apartments for them, and that's why we couldn't make it. Anyway, long story short, the therapist got everybody against me, and they took the treatment center out from under me. They said it was the other guy's fault. So now I had to go to, I only went to the 9th grade. And I in order to be a therapist, I had to have a GED at least. And now it's higher up, but back then it was just a GED.
Yeah.
So I got my GED, and I did 300 hours in the school, okay, in the college to get my addiction training. Then I needed 6,000 hours of supervised training on the job. So long story short, they took the treatment center out from under me because I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't read any contracts, and I'm a street kid. You mess with me, I punch you in the face.
Yeah.
Well, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So I had to bite the bullet and I stayed there. Okay. And they let me stay. They gave me what is known as the outpatient. I had 3 clients. All right. So they figured that eventually I'd go away. They were supposed to get 25% of that. I never got my percentage. I got a salary, but never got my percentage. And I was so hurt and so devastated that my therapist and my doctor screwed me out of the treatment center that I called my uncle up to kill them. And thank God, clarity came back because I called him back. He was getting on a plane, and I told him, no, don't do that. Forget it. I worked it out. Okay. And I don't want to get into the whole story, but there's more to the story. You have to buy the book in order to see what happens.
Yeah, you got to leave us hanging like this. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh.
I'll tell you how I got out of that program and what happened after I got my supervision.
Yeah.
I got to another program I started. My same friend said, I got another guy that wants to open up a treatment center. Now, by that time, I learned everything about how to run a program, what it took. So I said, oh, yeah. He says, yeah. He says, I said, okay. So he wants a business plan. I don't know how to write a business plan. You know, he went to 9th grade. What do I know? I got a GED.
Right.
You know? So he said, no. He said, I'll write it for you. So he wrote it. I went up to see this guy in West Palm Beach. 2 minutes before I get there, I realized I don't have the business plan. I forgot it. I was so nervous that I forgot the business plan. So anyway, I couldn't go back. I had to go forward. So I tell the guy, look, I'm embarrassed to tell you, but I thought I put it in my briefcase. I did. He said, I don't care. Here's a napkin. Tell me what you need the money for. I wrote it down on the napkin. I said I needed $250,000. I don't know. I keep coming up with that number. And we opened up a 30-bed facility. Very successful. After a year, okay, I didn't know he was a corporate raider. In other words, guys like that, they hire people that know what they're doing. They have the people build up the companies and then they take it out from under them.
Oh.
Well, I did the same stupid thing I did before. I didn't even have a lawyer. And I had a contract and we got into it one day and he says to me, you're fired. I said, you can't fire me. I'm your partner. He said, read your contract.
Oh my goodness.
I was going to throw him through the window.
Yeah.
All right, of the office. And
Yeah.
then I decided not to. I got and now my sponsor, okay, I hired to be the clinical director. I was the program director. Was making 29,000 a year, 28, whatever he was. And I gave him, I think, 50, just like the other guy. He bought a house. They says, come on, let's go. He don't know how to run a program. He says, I can't. I just bought a house, John. What am I going to do? So now here I am. I got my sponsor left me, but I understood. And this guy screwed me. And here I am sitting on my car with my box of my stuff that I had on my desk, crying. I couldn't believe it happened again.
Yeah.
So, and I became a clinical director for an indigent place, a 55-bed. It's called the old TC, Therapeutic Communities. And what they did was it was a not-for-profit. We had people that had HIV, dual diagnosed clients. By that time, I had my certifications and all of this stuff. So I was the program director or clinical director, rather. And then what happened was I'm watching how they're doing treatment. It's like stupid. They would get people in the middle of the room. They would beat them up, break them down, and then build them back up again. I says, wait a while. I didn't need anybody to break me down. I was beat up myself on my own. I didn't need any help.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was their style. And then at lunchtime, we would feed them chocolate cakes and all kinds of desserts because we got all our food donated. And then, of course, with the sugar, eventually they would start acting out. Then we put a sign on their neck, sit them on a bench, to teach them not to do that. I said, we're creating it, and now we're punishing them. I said, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Wow.
So anyway, long story short, there's a lot more that went on. I left. Then this woman I was with said to me, why don't you open up your own treatment center? I said, no, I don't want anything to do with treatment center. I said, besides, all I have is $300 left. Now I got 80,000 from one place. New Life was the first treatment center. I got 80,000 they gave me to get out of the second place. But I had a spending addiction. I'm a street kid. I got a lot of money. All of a sudden, I'm spending on every stupid thing you can buy, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, where was I? Okay. So what happened was she wanted me to open up. I said, look, I only have $300. My friend had a building next to his chiropractic office. It was a 750 square foot little house. And I said, look, Bill, can I rent it? He said, well, how much money do you have? I said, well, how much money do you want? He said, how much money do you have? I said, well, I only have $300. He said, tell you what, run it for a couple of months, build up your clientele, get your licenses and all that stuff. And then you can pay me $300 a month. I said, really? I said, okay. So here I am. Okay. Now, my friend that worked with me in this place called The Better Way, I asked him to be my partner. I said, look, I'll give you 50% of the company because he was a business guy. I like doing the work, you know. So he says, okay, let me see your books. I said, what books? I don't have any books.
Right.
Well, how do you know who pays you? They give me the money and put it in my pocket. They'll pay me, don't worry. You know? He said, no. We can't do it that way. I said, oh, okay, whatever way you want to do it, I don't care. I just want you with me. All right. So that happened. We had bill collectors chasing us. I opened up, then there was a place across the street. I outgrew my treatment center. I was doing therapy in the parking lot because I couldn't fit them in the treatment center. All right. So there was a place across the street, wasn't for sale. But he says, it's not for sale. I said, everything's for sale. So I went to the woman and I says to her, look, I want to buy your building because I knew she wasn't doing well with her practice. I said, I'll give you $25,000 more than the building's worth. But there's only one thing. You have to hold the mortgage. We didn't have hardly any money at all. So he says, okay. So eventually we sold that building. We made $150,000 off that building. But anyway, that's what we did. And then I hired my daughter and I hired my mother. And eventually we built up, and then we had collectors chasing us for money. Sometimes we couldn't make payroll, but we still gave people treatment if they didn't have any money, if they were motivated.
Yeah. Because it was something you knew it was important to do
We were
regardless.
we weren't money driven.
Yeah.
Okay. But the money came and it kept coming. And what happened was my partner's son, Gerald, was an internet genius. And he came in and I did the branding. I ran the company. Jerry ran the business. It was a three-legged stool. Long story short, we grew the business from that little 20, now it was 750 square feet to 2,500 square feet. And then we winded up with 7 buildings and 147 employees. And in 2012, we sold it for $45 million.
Oh, this
You
just
would have
in,
told me this story, I probably would have punched you in the face, thinking you're trying to make fun of me.
yeah.
But
Wow.
we were very blessed. One of the clients' father was a multi-millionaire. He saved his son's life. That's what we do anyway. And he bought the buildings for us. And what we did is we paid him back for the buildings. So that's how we went out of that. My partner, we would get 1,000 calls a day on the internet. And we would sell our calls for $250,000 to other treatment centers. And we
Oh.
only had 62 beds. So we had a 62-bed inpatient facility. We had an IOP, intensive outpatient. We had an outpatient, an aftercare. But what we became famous for is we were the first treatment center in the country. Okay, we're JACO accredited, which means it's the highest standard you can get, that hospitals get for doing treatment.
Wow.
And what I did was, I said, something's missing. My son almost died from this. I watched him put charcoal down his throat because he's a recovering addict too. And today he's 18 years clean. He's the best kid in the world. But what had happened was I said something, what, he got a 5 to 8% recovery rate. And what I did was I started to look for other things that cause depression and anxiety. Most people don't know this. It's not just a psychological problem. I wondered up getting hooked up with a lot of neuroscientists, geneticists, and I don't know how it happened. God bless me, but it happened. We did hyperbaric medicine. That's oxygen under pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, not only does wound healing and for TBI cases, which is traumatic brain injury cases, okay, it heals the brain. So drugs and alcohol damage the brain.
Yeah.
Okay. We did acupuncture. We did neurofeedback, biofeedback. We checked for heavy metals. Heavy metals cause interference in the neurotransmitters, so it mimics bipolar disorder and attention deficit disorder.
And Alzheimer's.
Yep. And
Yeah.
now we had leaky gut syndrome, okay, H. pylori infection, low testosterone, high testosterone. They all cause depression and anxiety, hypoglycemia, low thyroid, closed-end injuries. So these are co-contributing factors. What I lecture about, co-contributing factors to addiction.
Yes. Yes.
So what I also did was I got involved with Dr. Deborah Mash, who's a neuroscientist at the University of Miami School of Medicine. She was the head of the Brain Bank and the Alzheimer's Foundation. She was doing research on a plant medicine called, I'm also one of the leading experts on plant medicine. It's another thing I do. Anyway, called ibogaine. I don't know if you're familiar with ibogaine. Ibogaine
No.
is a bush from West Africa that the Weedy tribe used as a rite of passage. It's a partial psychedelic.
Okay. I was thinking ayahuasca.
Well, ayahuasca is 8 on the chart. Ibogaine is 10. Then you got psilocybin, peyote, mescaline, San Pedro, and all the other ones.
Okay,
All the other
good.
psychedelics. But ibogaine detoxes people in 24 hours, which is unheard of. But not only does it detox you, to put it simplistically, it sends you back into your childhood as an adult. And you have what is known as a cathartic experience. This is what happens. And they come out and they want treatment. They don't have any cravings. It's like a miracle. People don't even believe that until they see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I do with her. And I'm working over 20 years. Right now, she's in England. They're doing what they call FDA trials for ibogaine.
I find that so fascinating. I started in nursing and I actually worked in an Alzheimer's unit. So thinking of what you're saying is, oh my gosh, because all they do is throw them on the Ativan to control them. And it's
This
kind
is
of,
all, everything's about throw a pill at it. That's what it
yeah,
gets.
and it'll go away. Yeah, exactly. And I love the holistic approach. And I think that's why life coaching is so much, gaining so much ground and so wonderful today
Well,
is
that's interesting you brought that up. Okay. I also work with geneticist, Dr. Blum, who's the one who found the addiction gene. There is a gene. Okay. It's the main gene. It's the DRD2 ALE1 variant gene. And there's a bunch of genes that are connected to it, but that's the main driver. All right. And he put together an amino acid formula. And we have 15 papers on it, by the way. A double-blind study, which is the gold standard. Okay, it upregulates dopamine.
Yeah. Yes.
So we do amino acid therapy with them. We did colonics to clear out the lower intestines. We did massage therapy, lymphatic drainage, because drugs are also in the cellular body of your body. It's also in the cells of your body. Yeah. Saunas. We checked for heavy metals. We checked for allergy testing. We did also. People don't realize allergies can also cause depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
So these are things nobody, and they're still not doing it in the industry, did that. And we did group therapy, individual therapy, we did family therapy, and aftercare, all the standard stuff that everybody does. We did all of that also. Plus, we did trauma work with EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, yes, which is incredible. That works very well. So those are all the things that we did. Now, right now, I'm currently something very interesting. I'm getting involved, and I wasn't going to do this. I was in Taipei lecturing at a neuroscience conference. I lecture all over the world. I've lectured to over 100 countries about alternative medicine, how to treat mental health issues and addiction. And since I'm in 79 medical and scientific peer-reviewed journals, I have to upgrade that up on my website. Um, I'm into now I'm buying into a ketamine clinic. Now, my ketamine, for those who don't understand that, it's an anesthetic, okay, but at low doses, microdoses, turns into it's like a psychedelic. And what happens is you start to go actually into what I call the hard drive, which is the subconscious, to have resolution on some of the traumas and some of these things that get in your way of your life.
Yeah, that you don't even know. That you don't even know
You
they're
don't even
there.
know because you're subconscious, okay?
Yeah.
Now, see, to me, talk therapy deals with the software of the brain. These psychedelics deal with the hard drive. You know, it's like your computer. You get stuff off the computer, but it's still on your hard drive.
Yep.
So it's the same thing with your psychological problems. Remember, which is an integrative program. It's not just the head walking around, because then let's send the head to treatment and leave the body home.
Yeah,
Okay?
it's all connected physically and mentally and emotionally. It's all there. So we're going to wrap up here. I want to ask you, this is, and I mean, I have an idea. I just love all that holistic stuff because I'm actually going to be doing something for pets for in that same area. So I ask every guest as we wrap up here, if you're marching down the city with 100,000 people behind you and you have a banner, what does your banner say, John?
Real simple. Never give up.
Never give up. Never give. You didn't. Your life is a movie. I would not have.
Oh, by the way, I have a producer, Captain Sidney from Below Deck. I don't know if you
Yes,
made a television show.
I love that show.
And I have another producer called Randy. And right now they're trying to get it into a movie.
Yes, it has to be a movie. Are you kidding? I want to see the hot air balloon running into the fire station. I mean, please don't leave that detail out. I thank you so much. Let us know where we can find you. Where can they find your book? I'm going to give you
Okay, you can
the
go on.
floor.
There's a few books, but you could go on Amazon, or you go to my website, John, the initial J, Giordano.com, and you'll see television shows, and you'll see Alana Stewart, George Hamilton is on there, all kinds of different people. You'll see some of the content from James Brown, and you just go through all of that stuff. You see all the television shows, radio shows.
That sounds fun. And I'm glad that you have it all in one place. It's amazing. So, guys, John J. Giordano.com. Go look at his page, go find his books on Amazon. I thank you so much for being here today. You're such a interesting man, and I just feel like you're the most interesting man in the world. I feel like I need the movie. I need the movie, and I can't wait. Guys, I thank you all for being here, listeners, and for joining me for this wonderful storyteller and this wonderful man who has turned his life completely around and has really turned it into service of others, and especially reprogramming what he has had to go through his childhood, and to be the person that you are today is inspiring and aspiring. And I just thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me and allowing me to help some people out there too.
You bet. That's what we're doing together, all of us. Guys, if you have any comments, you want to get a hold of John, you have any questions, feel free to contact me at lifecoachmaureen.com. You'll also see all of my social media, my speaking, and all my fun stuff, my books. And if you want to go buy my books, they are available as well on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. My dog, as you can see, I'm going to do my prices right. There we go. My dog is more enlightened than I am, and my dog is my relationship coach. And how fitting on National Dog Day that we should go out and celebrate those puppies who teach us how to stay true to ourselves and to live life unconditionally. So for all of you out there listening, 5-star reviews, share this platform, grow this community. We love you all for listening. And John, you're just a joy for giving me an hour of your time that you'll never get back, that I am so grateful for. Thank you.
Thank you.